Obuhiwang jisichi vai fucking vai.
I'm gonna level with you. I don't know what TAOPUNK is, and I've never played Sekiro. So when everyone and their big fat ugly mamas started churning out headlines and thumbnails declaring that the newest game on the Steam block was a Sekiro meets Hollow Knight, TAOPUNK, Metroidvania, OMGs guys, it's the best game ever, I was a little skeptical and a lot confused. That string of words really didn't mean a whole lot to me, but I knew what a Metroidvania was, and that's all I needed to know. I probably should have paid more attention to that Sekiro part though, because this game straight up kicked my ass for 30 hours straight. So I went out of my comfort zone and did a little research prior to writing this script and discovered two things about Nine Souls. One, it absolutely crushed its crowdfunding, and two, it was developed by Red Candle Games. To date, Red Candle Games had released two horror games, Detention and Devotion. And though those games received great acclaim and amazing scores, I didn't really see how a company focused on horror would fare in the MV space. Plus, their game Devotion got pulled from Steam. Was it really that bad?
A week after its release, Devotion was pulled from Steam following a review bombing campaign led by Chinese citizens. The review bombing was the result of the inclusion of an art asset with a reference likening Chinese President Xi Jinping to Winnie the Pooh. The reference to Pooh was found in a poster in the game, which when interacted with, would flash the words, Xi Jinping, the Winnie the Pooh moron in Chinese.
Oh, baby. Any company that shits on Xi Jinping and the CCP is my favorite company. Here, take my $30, Red Candle Games. You've earned it. But I can't give a game a pass simply because its devs are victims of political censorship. I should probably play the game before I pass judgment. So, what is Nine Souls? You play as Yi, some kind of adorable fox monk who gets Mufasa'd by an old lady and splats to death. Some wholesome black tentacles arrive to save the day because this game was made in Taiwan and not Japan, and then a little boy wakes Yi from his hibernation by playing a flute. The two grow close in their little village of Peach Blossom, and all seems well until it's ritual time. Unable to part with his little buddy, Yi leaps forth and snatches the boy just as he's about to lose his head. From this point on, old Yi is back, baby. Back for revenge. That's a damn solid setup, but does this horror dev have what it takes to keep the thrills going throughout this flawless, underrated, TAOPUNK, Hollow Knight meets Sekiro? The CCP has concentration camps that persecute Uyghur Muslims and they must be held accountable? In other words, to appease the algorithm and grab your attention? Adventure?
Combat.
Oh, a baby. The combat in Nine Souls is so good. Like I mentioned earlier, I've never played Sekiro, but I know it's a parry-heavy game. And if it's anything like Nine Souls, maybe I should check it out soon, because I loved what Nine Souls brought to the table. I guess I'll start with the parries. And I say parries because there are three types of parries in this game. Your standard parry that blocks most attacks, an aerial parry that stops red glowing attacks, and the unbound counter that also stops red glowing attacks, but cooler. These parries do exactly what you think. Stop incoming attacks. Obviously, timing is key if you want to pull these parries off, but the game's a little more quote-unquote generous with its activation windows, at least for its standard parry. I put generous in quotes because mistimed parries will still punish you, but instead of you taking the full brunt of damage and staggering, you instead take what's called internal damage. This is that little red part of your health meter. This red section slowly recovers over time, as well as there being other methods of recovering it. It's a brilliant system that takes the pressure off of players needing to be perfect all the time, while still applying enough pressure to motivate players to strive for perfection. And when you pull off those perfect parries, oh, a baby, does it feel great. Not only do you stop the attack and avoid internal damage, but it makes this satisfying twang sound. Perfect parries can also stagger jabronis and deflect projectiles back at them, all while making you look like a complete badass. I cannot emphasize or properly articulate how amazing it feels going toe-to-toe with an enormous opponent only to render its every attack utterly useless. Many times while fighting the game's bosses, I'd enter a euphoric flow state as I dodged and parried their every move, getting lost in our intense and destructive ballet. Well, I say ballet, but I think the word that best describes the first half hour is hazing. These motherfuckers are absolutely brutal. I don't think I'm a very good measuring stick to assess how difficult these bosses are because I am just ass when it comes to parrying, but it wasn't uncommon for me to spend an hour plus on most of these bosses, especially in the mid to late game. And if that kind of difficulty and requisite dedication to take out a single boss sounds awful to you, don't sweat it. There's an accessibility mode called Story Mode that lets you adjust how much damage you do and take. If you want, you can pump up your damage to 1,000% and one-shot every boss with your Azure Bow. So keep that in mind as I continue to whine about how ruthless this game is and how it made me want to gouge my own eyes out. In all seriousness, these boss fights on standard mode are so good. I can't think of a single one I didn't have a blast fighting, even though my wife and daughters will attest that I hate this game. You know, on account of all the swearing and screaming, but they're not gamers, so they don't understand. Okay, let's return to general combat. One aspect of the parries I haven't brought up yet is the chi system. Every time you parry, whether perfect or not, you'll gain chi. And with chi, you can blow idiots up with talismans. It's so amazingly satisfying every time you pull off a chi blast. Just dashing through a jabroni and sticking them with a bomb. And the more chi you have, the more damaging the explosion. It's such a great mechanic and a perfect complement to the parry system, adding a little risk-reward to the mix. And you all know I love my combat to have some risk-reward. I suppose, since we're this deep into the combat section anyways, I should actually talk about Yi's attacks, huh? Other than the Chi Blast, Yi has a 3-hit ground and air combo and the extremely deady Azure Bow. Yi's combos feel great and allow you to seamlessly weave parries between strikes, which is as awesome as it is necessary. I don't think I'd have enjoyed this game at all if I had to be perfectly still to pull off a standard parry. The Azure Bow is a game changer. Once I saw how powerful and useful this thing was, upgrading it was priority 1. You only start with 2 shots, but those shots can be the difference between life and death. Not only can they clear a room if enemies are lined up just right, but shooting it provides iframes and can stagger bosses, which is incredibly helpful at providing you some breathing room. Speaking of iframes, Yi has a dash that allows him to slip away from sticky situations. And if you find yourself missing too many parries and taking too much damage, Yi can whip out his old medicinal pipe and take a hit to recover. Of course, pipe hits and Azure Bow shots replenish at save points, and so do the enemies. That's right, we're looking at a bona fide Soulsvania here, boys, complete with some slight runbacks and a very punitive corpse run system. Probably the most punitive corpse run system I've ever seen. Not only does death take away all your money, not only does death take away all your experience, but the game forces you to defeat the enemy who killed you if you want to get all your shit back. It sucks. Oh, and while we're on the subject of things that suck, I have a little suggestion. For all the devs out there, come here a second. Closer. Closer. Good. Now, listen. Can you all please stop giving every boss multiple f***ing phases? I remember when second phases were relegated just to the final boss, and it meant something. There was nothing more intimidating than when the final boss transformed and that chorus started singing in Latin or some shit. Nowadays, in regards to fighting a boss with a second phase, the great Raul Julia said it best as M. Bison in the Street Fighter movie.
For you, the day
second phase
graced your
boss fight
was the most important
boss fight
of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
Second phases have become so commonplace, they've lost their impact. Instead of being an imposing moment or a narrative surprise, they're used to create a tutorial in the first phase and/or to inflate an encounter's difficulty. Don't get me wrong, I love a good multi-tiered battle. The fight against Lady Ethereal was my personal favorite in this game, and that has 3 phases. But does every fight need multiple phases? Back in my day, bosses had these things called thresholds where, once you got their HP to a certain percentage, they'd start adding in new attacks and behaviors. Can we start doing that again sometimes? It gets incredibly frustrating having to go through multiple phases every time I die. I'm not saying we shouldn't have multi-phase boss fights. I'm just saying, maybe we could dial it back a bit? Maybe not include second phases in every single boss encounter? Just a thought. And that's finally it for combat. Combat's a huge part of Nine Souls, and it's great to see that it's as robust as it is fun. Its easy to pick up, hard to master parry system really makes this game something special. The way you can seamlessly parry while being on the offensive makes for a very fast-paced experience. And the internal damage system adds much needed grace to mistimed parries, making the game a little more accessible for us more parry-impaired gamers. And if you really can't get the parries down, you can always use story mode. I'd recommend not using it, as it might rob you of the euphoric flow states you can only achieve through mastering boss encounters, but you do whatever's best. I'm not the boss of you. This game's freaking hard. No joke. Everything hits like a goddamn truck. There's no shame in adjusting enemy damage output if you really want to enjoy the game. Speaking of enjoying this game, despite its outlandishly punitive corpse running system and overuse of multiple boss phases, I adore Nine Souls combat. No amount of words can do its combat justice. It's just something you have to experience to fully appreciate.
Abilities, platforming.
I've mentioned a bunch of Yi's abilities in the combat section already, which is a good sign because that means abilities have utility in and out of combat. Yi's an agile little guy with a lot of moves. Out the gate, he can parry, dash, run up certain walls, and use a grapple hook type move. As you progress, you'll unlock more parries that have some out of combat utility, an air dash, a double jump, and a scout mode for your Mystic Nymph, a holographic drone that's just the coolest thing. Most of these abilities are pretty standard stuff for an MV, with the parries in the Mystic Nymph being more uncommon additions. The aerial parry can be used to bounce off certain objects, and the Mystic Nymph can be used to scout areas and to slip into vents to hack stuff, opening locked doors and whatnot. With such a repertoire, it's fun to simply move around and engage with Yi's world of New Kunlun, and it especially helps that he feels great to control. The platforming in Nine Souls is pretty dang good. There's plenty of enemies to dispatch or avoid, and in between these confrontations are fun mandatory and optional platforming sections. Nine Souls strikes an impressive balance between combat and platforming you only see in the best Metroidvanias. You'll be zipping all over the place and dodging environmental hazards just as much as you'll be dodging your enemy's sword swipes. And Nine Souls does a great job of providing players unlockable shortcuts upon clearing tricky platforming or combat sections. The level design overall is masterful, and I appreciate how open biomes become once you unlock their shortcuts. It may take you a half hour or longer to completely open up an area, what with all the platforming and combat, but after unlocking all the area's shortcuts, you can zip through it in seconds. Again, this is a testament to Nine Souls' clever level design, and I always appreciate it when devs respect players' time. And as you can imagine, all these shortcuts make backtracking an absolute breeze. And that'll do it for this section. Although Yi's combat abilities are a little more unique, his traversal abilities are pretty standard, but that doesn't mean they're not fun to use, both in combat and for platforming. I loved platforming in this game. Jumping from crate to crate to avoid getting crushed, bopping off those orbs, and then air dashing through a narrow passage of spikes. It all feels wonderful and is complemented by excellent level design.
Progression.
Lots to talk about here. Since Nine Souls is kind of a Soulsvania, I want to get leveling out of the way. Unlike most Soulsvanias, there are no stats, and currency is only used for shopping. Yi levels up through murder, but I never knew when he actually leveled up. It's such a subtle piece of fanfare. I usually only knew I leveled up when I went to a node, this game's save point, and saw I had a skill point. Skill points are used in a skill tree. Shocking, I know. This skill tree can increase your number of chi charges, the types of chi you can use, affect parrying behaviors, and all kinds of other stuff. You can also collect skill points while exploring, and that's always fun. Overall, it's a nifty skill tree that allows for some fun player expression. Another form of player expression is this game's charms, the Jade system. Yi only has so many computing units, or notches, and can equip Jades based on the amount of computing units he has. These Jades are pretty diverse, affecting things like internal damage recovery, preventing knockback, or giving you all new moves, like the downward descent. Jades can be found in chests and purchased at Chio's shop, along with computing units and poison. Poison's probably the weirdest collectible in this game. There's a character named Shinong, aka the best character in the game, who can for some reason ingest poison and then somehow convert that ingested poison into alcohol that increases Yi's max HP. I'll let you all guess what that alcohol creation process looks like.
That's piss.
There are other shops at which Yi can spend his hard-earned Jin, this game's currency found in chests or dropped by enemies. There's a 3D printer where he can buy stuff and recycle stuff for more Jin, and there's Yi's buddy Kwafu, an expert engineer who modifies your equipment with materials you find along your journey, as well as spending Jin. All of these shops will ultimately be available in the Four Seasons Pavilion, Yi's safe haven and the game's central hub. Another important character, probably the most important character, found in the Four Seasons Pavilion is Xuan Xuan, the boy who woke Yi up from his hibernation and the reason Yi decided to continue his journey of revenge. Or justice. I don't care, I just want to blow things up with chi. Xuan Xuan doesn't provide services or increase any stats. He's more of a narrative element that showcases Yi's personal growth through their relationship. To progress Yi and Xuan Xuan's relationship, you have to bring back artifacts you find along your journey. I'll dive more into this in the spoilers section. I just wanted you to know that Xuan Xuan exists in the hub area and that he physically changes how the hub looks based on the artifacts you bring him. I thought that was pretty neat. Also, your AI servant Abacus exists at the hub. He's also a narrative element, so not a lot to talk about with him at the moment. Nine Souls has a few character-focused side quests, but they're all mostly game-spanning side quests with intermittent rewards dispensed throughout. Very much like how Dark Souls does their side quests. Those side characters in Nine Souls mainly stay in the hub area until the climax of their quests. Unlike Souls games, where these side characters can be found all over the place throughout their journey. I didn't mind Nine Souls' approach to side quests. It meant I wasn't going to miss something because the quest givers were all in one spot I frequented often. So I guess that'll do it for progression. Despite there being no traditional gear or stats, there's a lot of player expression to be found in the skill tree and Jade system. And thanks to the plethora of shops in the Four Seasons Pavilion, there's a ton of things to increase. Max HP, healing pipe effectiveness and usage, and as your bow ammo and damage increases. You can also increase your slash and talisman damage by collecting greater Dao fruit, but that'll require you to kill some of these intense bosses first. So yeah, good luck with that.
Exploration.
I already touched a little on exploration when I discussed Nine Souls' masterful level design and how its use of shortcuts greatly enhances backtracking. And since I've already brought up backtracking, I guess I should talk about the fast travel. It's weird. You get fast travel pretty early, but you can only teleport from a node or save point to the pavilion and then back to the last node you were at. It's kind of odd, especially because you eventually unlock a way to teleport to any unlocked node, but even this is kind of limited because you can only teleport to nodes from the pavilion. So if I want to teleport from the factory to the mines, I'll need to go from the factory to the pavilion and then to the mines. It's fine, but it's a little time consuming for seemingly no reason. I get why they did it this way. A lot of events can be triggered in the pavilion upon revisits, and forcing players to use the pavilion as a middleman between teleports ensures players will trigger these events. So I'll give it a pass, mainly because it's not that obnoxious. An interesting thing about Nine Souls that directly affects backtracking and exploration is that Nine Souls' biomes are deceptively small, sometimes only having 2 or 3 areas. Some areas are bigger than others, but once you unlock all of an area's shortcuts, you can blaze through Nine Souls' world pretty easily. I don't see this as a negative at all. First visits to any area are going to take you a respectable amount of time to get through because enemies are going to surprise and kill you, or platforming sections are going to slow you down, or you're going to explore off the beaten path to find goodies. I don't know, I just found it surprising how small Nine Souls' world actually is once you unlock all the shortcuts. I'd frequently dread revisiting an area and be like, gosh, this place took me forever to get through, only to always be astonished by how fast I could get through it now. Again, I'm going to contribute this to its masterful level design. The biomes themselves are pretty cool. They're all easily distinguishable and unique, and some have cool gimmicks, like the warehouse with its crate transportation system, the transmutation area with its radiation, and the prison with its stealth section. This game does a lot to shake things up, so there's a lot to do in this game, and even more to discover. I loved finding chests. The rush of dopamine I'd get whenever I found something at the end of an optional platforming section was unmatched, and the stuff you'd find was always cool and worth your time. Poison to increase your HP, dark steel to modify your bow, Dao fruit to give you an extra skill point, artifacts for Xuan Xuan, and of course, lore items. Point is, there's a lot to find in this game, so exploration felt very rewarding. Even finding shortcuts felt incredible. You know what didn't always feel incredible? Stumbling across one of the game's optional mini-bosses. Don't get me wrong, I freaking loved these optional fights for their challenge and rewards, but sometimes I'd find them at the most inopportune moments, which is part of the fun, and you can always leave the fight and come back to it later, so there's really nothing to complain about here, other than the fact that you will get your ass handed to you sometimes. And let's say you do run like a little bitch so you can fight another day. How are you going to remember to revisit the mini-boss to dispense some of that sweet revenge? Why, the in-game map, of course. The map's a pretty good compromise between keeping things mysterious for the player and being super helpful. Upon entering a biome, you don't have any map information until you get a map chip from a Shanghai robot. You can either pay for a copy of the chip or take it by force. I don't judge. Head back to the hub area and give the chip to Shanghai 9000, a character I forgot to mention in the last section, and he'll update your map so it's more detailed and shows how many collectibles are in an area, including chests, lore items, and, of course, mini-bosses. The map data doesn't show specifics, just the number of things to collect in an area and how much you've collected. I've heard arguments on both sides about how a map should be revealed to players in Metroidvanias. Some, including myself, want the map to be filled in as I explore, while others prefer the mystery of going through the biome before getting a detailed map. While Nine Souls appeases the latter crowd, it's tough to get too butthurt about the map not being detailed at first because, like I mentioned earlier, these areas and biomes are actually quite small once you open them up with shortcuts. That's it for exploration. There's a lot to do and a lot to see, so exploring and finding stuff feels pretty great because you'll always be moving the needle on something with every collectible you find. May that something be a side quest, or material, or equipment modification for your pipe, or finding something related to player expression like jades, computing units, or the like. There's even some cool hidden puzzles to find while you're running around, so keep an eye on your environment. Backtracking throughout New Kunlun is easy and fun too, with previous areas being a breeze to traverse after opening shortcuts. And the fast travel system, though slightly annoying, is ultimately super helpful.
Atmosphere, narrative.
Atmosphere and narrative are real strengths for Nine Souls, but like everything has been a strength thus far, so would you expect anything less at this point? Let's start with the atmosphere. First off, just look at this game. The character designs, the colors, the animation, the dynamic backgrounds. It's all incredible, top shelf stuff. I especially love Yi's design. He's cute and memorable and mysterious with an underlying air of wisdom and deadliness about him. To all you backers who got the statue of Yi, I just want you to know I'm incredibly jealous and I hate you. The designs for all the game's characters are pretty solid. Some people might have something to say about its furry aesthetic, but I never felt like this was a furry game, despite 90% of its characters being some kind of anthropomorphic animal. And it's not like this is a horny game or anything. Ah, geez. Get that off the screen. The sound design's pretty great. I already discussed how much I love that perfect parry sound. Even hearing it as I edit this video gives me goosebumps. I wasn't the biggest fan of Nine Souls music. Most tracks were fine and set the mood perfectly, but some tracks were just grating. Take this one for example. It sounds like someone's legit gargling. I'm not a fan. I don't know what you all listen to in Taiwan, but I'm giving this track a hard pass. I guess when talking about the game's atmosphere, I should talk about its TAOPUNK-ness. So yeah, Nine Souls sure is TAOPUNky. I don't really know what to say. A lot of imagery and philosophies used in the game originate from Taoism, an Eastern school of thought I'm not familiar with, nor do I feel like doing any research on. So I suppose the best my ignorant Western can say about this aspect of the game's atmosphere is, it sure looks and feels Asian to me, which I absolutely loved. Whether it be the alien technology or the unfamiliar Eastern influences, I, for one, relished in exploring its vastly unfamiliar world. And I think I picked up a few things along the way, which is, always a plus. The final thing I want to talk about with the atmosphere bleeds directly into the game's narrative, and that's environmental storytelling. I won't spoil anything, but there's a lot going on in this game, and you can pick so much of it up from the environments. I'll be vague even though this happens within the first 15 minutes of the game, but simply taking in the environment right after the inciting incident was unnerving. It was apt to say that I was hooked from the very start, because this game is dark. Very dark. Moving on to the game's actual narrative, I have to admit, I was a little worried at first. I heard Nine Souls was narrative heavy with tons of dialogue, which is not my favorite thing for Metroidvania. But after having played through the game, I can definitively say that, yes, this game talks. A lot. That might turn some MV fans off, but not me as long as it's done well. And Nine Souls' narrative is done very well. Not only did I enjoy the story and the characters and the game's deep lore, I loved its narrative twists and turns, and I attribute its narrative success to its multi-pronged delivery method. Unlike most Souls-likes, Nine Souls is not afraid to hold your hand as it guides you through Yi's tale. There's a very clear beginning, middle, and end with many of its characters, including Yi, especially Yi, who show significant growth. And because of this, you will get attached to these characters and you will get invested in their journeys, which is not something you can say for characters like the Chosen Undead. There's just something special in watching your protagonist's story unfold that a nameless protagonist just can't do. But this direct method of storytelling is but only one modality in which Nine Souls tells its tale. Aside from the aforementioned environmental storytelling, you'll find notes, item descriptions, audiovisual logs, NPC dialogue, flashbacks, you name it, Nine Souls does it. There is no room for ambiguity in Nine Souls if you pay attention and explore. World building, motivations, exposition, everything is there for you to discover if you want. So yes, there is a lot of reading, but I promise the story is well worth your time. That brings us to the game's endings. The, in my opinion, bad ending and the vastly superior true ending. I'll dive into the specifics of these endings in the spoilers section. I just wanted general audiences to know that Nine Souls has multiple endings, like all excellent Metroidvanias should. And that's it. It's time for spoilers. Go to this timestamp to fast travel to my final thoughts.
Spoilers.
Welcome to the spoilers section, where every obscure thing is brought up and the format don't matter. First, I want to say I love the running motif Red Candle Games has going in its games, that of people being oppressed by a corrupt government. Red Candle is a Taiwanese developer, and Taiwan's history with China is one of oppression and bloodshed. And it's easy to see how this relationship between the two nations has influenced Red Candle's games. I mean, for f***'s sake, the tension was about the White Terror. Look it up. And Nine Souls continues to explore this theme with the Solarians being the oppressors of the Ape Men. You can see this rampant corruption represented by the souls who run each biome. One soul in charge of a vault that's meant to document how Solarian history abuses his station in order to pad his pockets. He even goes so far to remove Solarian artifacts to make room for the aristocracy's clothes and belongings. And, if you'll indulge me while I put on my tinfoil hat, the Solarians accidentally created a virus that wiped out their species. That sounds a lot like what happened in Wuhan, China when they leaked the corrupt. In all seriousness, I gotta say, boys, I loved the true ending to this game. It got me right in the feels. The basic ending, which is what I got at first, left so much to be desired. It was just so bleh. And they did that on purpose because they knew I had to get the better ending, and damn it if they weren't right. There's a point of no return in the game that's overtly stated and even tells you to do any unfinished business before moving forward. I obviously didn't take that advice and paid for it with a crap ending. Thankfully, after beating the game, reloading your save pushes you back before the point of no return. So I was able to get the true ending on the same save file. I always appreciate when developers do that. So how do you get that true ending? Kinda makes sense, but is also kinda demanding. Not Sea of Stars level of demanding, God no, but demanding nonetheless. To attain the true ending, you have to do 4 things. 1, find every Solarian artifact and gift them the Xuan Xuan in order to develop a deeper relationship with the boy. 2, find and feed all the poisonous items to Shenong so he becomes the chief of the Ape Men. This was the iffy part of the true ending to me, but it's fine. 3, find the rhizomatic bomb in a secret tomb and hand it over to Kwafu. And 4, after the point of no return, talk to Kwafu and choose the Save the Ape Men dialogue option. And boom! Time for the true ending. Ultimately, I like this path to the true ending a lot. Essentially, Yi must bond with Xuan Xuan and want to sacrifice everything for him. And Yi must trust that the Ape Men tribe will survive and protect Xuan Xuan. Thus, the reason why making Shenong the chief is vital. These first 2 steps require you to find every artifact and every poisonous item in the game, which is fine and not too tough as long as you have all the map chips. My only slight nitpick here is that convincing Shenong to go back to the tribe via finding all the poisonous items is slightly contrived, but it still works fine enough. In the end, these first 2 steps build the emotional foundation needed to motivate Yi toward his final sacrifice, and I freaking love it. The next 2 steps are pretty simple. Yi needs a way to eliminate his mistake, and what better way than finding a super deadly bomb? And the final step has Yi and the player consciously choosing the path to save the ape men. And so, the path to the true ending involves 2 collectathons that also build relationships with respective characters along the way. A short but kinda hidden but definitely optional puzzle that rewards players with a unique key item, and a conscious decision that reinforces Yi's growth and resolve. I don't know what to tell you. This is an exceptional path to a true ending. It has emotional weight and rewards thorough exploration. It's everything I want in a true ending's path. And I haven't even talked about the ending or its lead up. After choosing to help the ape men, Yi has to say his goodbyes because he knows he's not coming back from this. And his goodbye to Xuan Xuan is absolutely devastating because he has to lie to comfort this kid. And it doesn't get any better when you watch Yi listen to the last message his sister ever sent him. It's some truly heart-wrenching stuff. Then there's the matter of the final boss. 9 Souls had to go and give the final boss a completely new phase for the true ending, and I'm here for it. In a Metroidvania, the true final boss should either be a completely different boss from the standard route, or give the original boss an additional phase, regardless of how much complaining I did earlier about how every boss doesn't need multiple phases. And let me tell you, this new phase is a son of a bitch. But upon finally defeating her, we get an amazing ending and an incredibly emotional send-off for our little fox man in the yellow robe. It's absolutely beautiful, and I'm so glad I got to experience this tale, not of revenge, but of redemption.
Conclusion.
9 Souls, without a doubt, is one of the best Metroidvanias ever created. Combat, exploration, narrative, presentation, the path to the true ending. In every aspect that makes a Metroidvania excellent, 9 Souls excels. My only real critique is that it's way too hard for your average gamer, maybe even for your average MV fan. But even that critique's a moot point because of the game's story mode accessibility feature. I'm not gonna say 9 Souls is the perfect Metroidvania. I personally think its exploration was a little too linear, or at least a little too curated for my tastes. But that's what you get when the game focuses on narrative, and I ain't mad about it. Its exploration also didn't have that X factor that made me want to explore, like that feeling I get where it feels like I'm exploring places where I shouldn't be or something like that. Plus, there's this one part after the point of no return where the game turns into a scrolling level, but for some reason hides your HUD, so you can't see your life or your pipe and key charges or your arrow ammo. What's that all about? This part was the worst. I know this seems silly, but I gotta ask it. Would I recommend 9 Souls? Of course I would. 9 Souls is top tier and absolutely deserves your time. MV vets are gonna love it as long as they don't mind its narrative focus. And MV noobs are gonna dig everything it does because it does everything an excellent Metroidvania should. And if the difficulty is putting you off, just remember you can adjust it so enemies only deal 1% of their regular damage output. This can be the hardest or easiest game you've ever played. I really don't know what else to say about 9 Souls. It's one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played, and I've played a lot of Metroidvanias. Maybe I'll try to end this by sounding enlightened or some shit. Here we go. In 9 Souls, the fusion of Taoist philosophy and Metroidvania gameplay creates a harmonious balance between exploration and enlightenment. As we navigate its intricately designed world, we are reminded that every journey is not just about reaching a destination, but about discovering profound truths along the way. 9 Souls invites us to find harmony in its chaos, much like the Tao itself. Hey, what'd you think of that? That sounded pretty enlightened, right? What do you mean that sounded like something from a fortune cookie?